Talking about conflict avoidance, to be wimpy. The desire to avoid conflict in a relationship is very common, but for very different reasons. The involvement with a partner who is unable to do conflict resolution makes it nearly impossible to work out difficulties constructively, and simple disagreements often escalate into humongous battles. And understandably, a person may wish to avoid these nightmare fights by sidestepping the power struggles. So also a partner who's egocentric may wish to dodge a person's disapproval, or they hide selfish acts and avoid conversations with white lies and focus on issues in the relationship. And when they're exposed, they seem to claim, I didn't tell you because I didn't want to stress you out, or the partner is conflict avoidant because they wish to escape disapproval or opposition, or they may just be a very destructive person because they want to control all the information of what they're doing or not doing. But the deal is, conflict avoidant people are very immature. And they come from that conflict avoidance because as children, their parents did not handle their activities very well. Their parents were often unaccepting of their negative behaviors and turned into Broadway productions every time they did something wrong. And so, what they chose to do is do white lies so they could deceive their parents to avoid conflict. Unfortunately, many people go into their marriages and their adult life doing the same thing because they want to avoid a conflict and avoid accountability. There's also the narcissist who cannot stand to be responsible for anything. So they're always wanting to be right, and they're always wanting to deflect, and they're always wanting to control the narrative because they're so egotistical they can't even stand the idea that they are incorrect. And so we live in this culture where narcissism, especially, is very pervasive, and people are very mature because accountability just isn't in the cards. Unfortunately, they never grow up, and then they get married, and then they breed, and then they create kids, and then they become parents. And they are teaching their kids to not take accountability either because everybody else in the world is more responsible for their problems than they are. And so we live in this very groomed culture where taking accountability is just not in the cards. And many people find themselves saddled with someone in their marriage who cannot take accountability. Now, here's what conflict really is if you want to be married. Any conflict you have in a relationship is only designed, no matter how emotional it is to make the relationship better. The people escalate in conflict and start name calling and saying horrible things to each other. The only reason they do that, the red flag of calling names or saying horrible things, is because you're not a very good listener. You suck. You don't listen well. And so they have to resort to name calling and doing other things just to get your ugly ass to pay attention. And that is a very frustrating thing. To be married to somebody that you have to name call and do horrible things and say horrible things just to get them to actually listen, which they never do because all they focus on is the horrible name you called them or the thing you said. They don't care about the point you're trying to make. They could care less that you actually may have a truth. What they want to care about is, oh, you called me this or you said that to me. God forbid they actually accept the idea that they're crappy listeners. So, a partner who refuses to see their loved one's point of view often digs in and continues to repeat and promote their own point of view because now they can deflect because you called me a name and that's what I remember for the next 40 years. I'm going to remember the name you called me. I'm not going to remember the fact that you were trying to tell me something that would make our relationship better. No, God forbid I do that. I can't do that. I have to remember the name you called me. I have to remember the horrible thing you said. I can't just assimilate the idea that I was being a total jerk. I have to point at you because you became the bigger jerk by calling me the name. So a power struggle ensues, and often the dogmatic partner frequently resorts to very terrible things to actually get the other person's attention. And the person on the opposite ends tends to feel disrespected and demeaned, and they usually feel left with two choices: to just surrender or counter in an ugly manner. And then you have what's called transactional analysis. And that is where one person chooses to parent the other. Well, you said blah, 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 blah. Or you did this to me. Or why can't you do this? Or you didn't wash the dishes. Or you did not do this. And so they love to be the parent. And what they're doing is disrespecting the other person by treating them like a child. And people in marriage, they get so used to raising their kids that they forget to treat each other like an adult. So they'd rather tell you what a crap bag you are by, exposing what you did not do and violated their very existence on the planet Earth because they're so freaking egocentric, they have to stand in the parent role and treat you like crap. They cannot even imagine treating you like an adult, even though you both are, and even though they married you, even though you're in a covenant. God forbid they lower their standards to become a human being married to another adult and treat you like one. Because if they did, you guys might not have resentment and might actually have sex every year or something like that, which is better than what you're doing now. So, the thing is that what people have to do is they have to realize that, hey, I have to treat my spouse like an adult. What do adults talk like? Well, adults do if you have a job, you do it at work. When you do this, this is how it affects me. I'm very upset because you have done this continuously, and how it affects me is this. Adults do conflict very safely because they respect the fact that you're not aware of what you're doing and the results that you're causing in my life. Now we have a way in which we can share perspectives. But when it comes to people who marry and have a covenant, which is reflective of a relationship with God, God forbid you treat your spouse like you would God. That is where you're supposed to learn how to love God. Is the covenant you have, which is the only covenant you will have on the planet Earth with your spouse, to teach you how to love God. But most people are too stupid to do that and too egotistical, so they treat their partner like crap, not an adult. It may be wise for the person who's being beaten up during a conflict to accept that the partner may be extraordinarily defensive and immature and lack the ability for sincere contemplation to understand how they're coming across because they have to exhibit their emotions and their power more than they want to exhibit the respect of becoming an adult. Now, here's the interesting thing. We as human beings have the ability to say, if you want me to hear you, I need you to talk to me like this. If you want me to hear you and respond to you, I need to be treated respectfully. We have a right to dictate to another party how to speak to us. And do we have to talk to people who are not respectful to us? No, we set the terms in which they communicate to us, and if they choose not to do that, we let them know that I'm not going to hear you like this. I'm not going to take this behavior from you. If we did more of that and more setting of boundaries of what I can do and what I can't do, not I'm never going to listen to you or yeah, I'm not going to have anything, but let them know what the terms are. We would have a much better relationship. But no, people are too egotistical, too selfish for that. They get married and they breed and they do all this stupid crap and they get together and they buy their house and then they act like idiots to each other. And I call it job security from a therapist perspective. The other category of conflict avoidance involves fairly egocentric behavior, where the partner who's dodging conflicts may be doing so to avoid discussion about their behavior in the relationship. They do a thing called deflect. Well, how about when you did this? Or what about this when this happens? Or, the other day you told me this. They don't want to talk about what you're bringing up. They don't want to talk about that. What they want to do is deflect, deflect, deflect. And once again, that's another narcissistic behavior. Our media does that all day long. They also gaslight. Oh, you're crazy. That's not how it happened. That's not what happened. This is how it really happened because I know the truth more than you and more than the whole universe. I am the holder of the truth for the entire universe. And you and anybody that has a different opinion than me, you're just not godlike like I am. I am the God. That's how idiotic people are in our culture nowadays. And we have to understand that we've got to get a hold of ourselves if we want to have relationships, especially breed and have children, and make your children actually have a voice in this life instead of being your narcissistic little puppet to raise and to control at the park and control what friends they have and control how well they do in school as an object of a reflection of who you are. So, what we have to understand is we have grown up and we have been exposed over many years to this wokey, crazy ass idiots who have to tell and be involved in every decision in the human race and who have to dictate the terms in their transgender, LGBTQ, Black Lives Matter perspective. Because if you don't have that, you can't be a human being. You need to be locked away somewhere from the human race because we're the only humans on this planet. You see, and we've grown up in this crazy culture where anything you say or do, especially in social media, is going to be reflected in this wokey, crazy way. And we're getting away from that, hopefully. They're finally exposed for what the liars and the lack of integrity that they really are. And they've had all this power running our government, running our legal system, and doing all that. So we're kind of warped right now. But conflict avoidance is more than an occasional thing. It's a staple of how people move through life. And moving through life with the wokies who have no reason, who have only insanity, and have only egotistical lesbian or gay positions where they have to tell you how awful you are as a human being if you don't think like they do, you're going to have a really hard time because you're going to want to avoid conflict, not only for legal reasons, but for social reasons, because they're going to shut you down and box you out. And that's how we've lived for so many years. And we got to get away from that. All right, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to talk about how to work with conflict avoidance and become better people. So come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about conflict avoidance to be wimpy. One of the main reasons someone might avoid engaging in conflict is the hope of moving away from discomfort. The actual act of engaging in a situation that have contention or disputes is often very uncomfortable. But what's more important to discuss and more important to understand when it's involving conflict is I'm trying to resolve something with you. I am not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm not trying to disrespect you. I'm not trying to do anything horrible. I'm trying to make our relationship better. And you may not like what I'm saying, but we as adults need to understand that we have different perspectives on truths. And if we're going to have different perspective on truths and have a relationship, especially if we're going to breed and be married and have to, do crazy things with each other and actually have to cooperate, we're going to have to understand that if you're going to exist in this adult life, people have different perspectives. And your job as a Socratic learner, like the philosophers, as a human being of intellect, is to actually understand other people's perspective rather than make everybody conform to yours. Much like the angry transvestites have been running our world for the last 20 years. We, as conflict avoiders, are not going to have a very good life if we don't embrace the idea that adult life has conflict. But it's not a bad goal. It's not a negative thing to have conflict. Conflict makes us evolve. Conflict is geared to help us learn from each other. But that means both parties, not the turd you're married to, if they're such an egotistical person and a terrible listener, they're going to have to learn from you that you have boundaries requiring them to hear your perspectives. And if you have no boundaries and you have no spine, you're not going to be heard. And when people are not heard, they live in resentment, irritability, rage, anger. Most of anger and rage are created by the lack of a person having a voice in their life. And these people walk around passive aggressively, blowing up occasionally and acting like a lunatic. And then all the other times sitting around and stuffing it, calling it picking their battles. Picking your battles is a crappy way to go through life. Everything involving conflict needs to be safe, adult like, without the Broadway productions and the arias. It just needs to be a simple transaction. Unemotional is better, which means that, hey, you know, I need you to hear me on this. I need to feel like you can at least assimilate a different perspective than your own. I need us I need you to lower your defenses and your tone of voice and understand that I need you to listen. We have to dictate that to other people because in this culture, people have not learned how to listen. They want to listen to their own crap and make everybody agree with them. And that's because the wokies want to have control of every narrative in this life. And we've been so used to our stupid primal media, the most important aspects of media out there that everybody listens to and everybody participates in are all about their own narratives. And we all are supposed to hear and bow down to their narratives about their democratic process and their Democratic Party and their liberal crazy crazies and all of the things that we're all supposed to be doing that are so wonderful and healthy, even though they're just theories and stupid things that they've made us spend money on and do and watch and participate in, like COVID. And what we've done is bow down to them. And since we've done that, we've lost our voice and we need to get it back. We need to get it back in a constructive way, not an angry way. So if we're going to fear being rejected or hurt or being not accepted, we need to cut it out. We need to have boundaries, what I can do and what I can't do. And that means our voice needs to be heard. It doesn't mean it needs to be agreed with. So why people do this conflict avoidance? Well, they're people pleasers. They have mental health conditions like depression or anxiety, or they have such a low energy that they don't want to ever do conflict. So they live like Eeyore, whatever. Okay. Yeah, that's living, baby. The hope of sidestepping a power struggle is immature. is childlike. Sometimes discussions can undo current status quo that is not good. If you want to resolve conflict, you have to be a good listener. Now, here's the strange thing: the listener is in charge of the conversation. That means they need to come with questions from curiosity of another person's perspective so they can learn from them, not so they can form an argument to tell them how wrong they are. The other thing is the attempt to people please. Sometimes in life, you're going to have to ruffle some feathers, and people actually respect it when you're trying to lead them to a different or a better solution or an idea that needs to be considered. Also, concern about a relationship ending. There's many people that are fear that I'm too ugly, too whatever, too stupid, whatever. I don't have enough integrity. I'm not a good enough person. My mom and dad told me how horrible I am. They live in their insecurities and they're afraid that the relationship is going to end because they're just not worth it. So they don't ever do conflict. And so we got to understand, if you're going to be married and you're going to breed and you're going to have a house and you're going to have responsibilities, you're going to have a voice. And if you choose not to, you're going to make everybody in this life miserable around you, because when you do conflict, you're going to be nasty and angry and resentful. But if you regularly do conflict, and it's not nasty and it's not resentful and it's adult like, meaning you have not a lot of tone, you're transactional, you're considerate of another person's opinion, you care about another person's point of view, even if you think they're batshit crazy. That's good. That's how we have to go about conflict. Is I'm going to respect your voice, I'm going to validate your voice. Okay, so this is how you think about it. This is what's important to you, because the deal is, if you're going to resolve a conflict, most of all conflict comes from this idea. You've got two people. One of them thinks of the vacation as, we're going to see the sights. The other one's meaning is, I need to lay on the beach. And that's a vacation for me. The other one, see the sights. So if the meaning of one's vacation is to see the sights and the other person's meaning is to lay on the beach, you need to compromise. We're going to spend sometimes laying on the beach and we're going to spend sometimes seeing the sights. And that's a vacation for both of us. When people resolve conflict, they don't tackle the idea of how to solve the conflict before they understand the meaning. The meaning is more important than the resolution, because the resolution won't help anybody if it doesn't consider what the argument means to one person compared to the other person. So let's say it's a child's discipline. Well, one thinks you're an abusive parent, and the other thinks they're trying to do something constructive to help their child. If one of you is going to come at the argument that you're an abusive parent, and the other one's trying to say, hey, I'm just trying to make this kid a better kid, now we have a way to compromise, instead of just sitting in our narratives and not understanding the meaning of the argument before we resolve the argument. So the resolution might be, okay, before I discipline, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3. I'm going to give them a choice. And no, I'm not going to hit them. I'm actually going to give them a timeout, or I'm going to take something away for a day. If you want to have conflict management skills, it's impossible to get through life to have to resemble anything near what you want to without engaging in conflict. So if a person's goals to include healthy connection and relationships, feel joy, contentment, fulfillment in life, and respect, it's conflict. It's actually having a voice. So what you want to do, if you want to be heard, is you have to practice acceptance. You can't resolve a habit unless you accept that it exists in the first place. You are not only responsible for what you think you've done, but you're also responsible for how you've been perceived. So if you think, I was just trying to discipline my child, for instance, and the other one perceives you as an abusive parent, you're also responsible for the abusive parent perspective, even if you don't agree with it. So sitting around telling, well, I didn't intend to hurt the child. I didn't intend to do anything wrong. Now you're trying to just get out of it. Shut the hell up. Listen to what they're saying. You are abusing. Oh, you see, you thought I was abusing. What made you think I was abusing? Well, you did this. Oh. So you saw that. Okay. I need to understand that because I did not see it that way. Now I understand where you're coming from. But instead, idiots in this culture, the way we've grown up now in this global economy where everybody's a moron and not accountable, they go, oh, my intention was this, and this. And that's what I care about is what my intentions are, because my intentions are the most important thing on the planet Earth. I could care less about how anybody sees my intentions. They just want to justify their own crap. And unfortunately, in our culture, that's normal. Don't accept it. We need to move on. We need to grow. We need to evolve as human beings. If you're going to breed, if you're going to be married, if you're going to have a house and a job, if you're going to manage people, you better get some balls. You better grow up and you better take some accountability for how you're seen rather than sit around and excuse yourself with your stupid intentions. You also want to take mindfulness as a part of your life. So, part of the issue with conflicts is that discomfort is like what meditation teaches you is understand that life is suffering. Mindfulness is the ability to understand suffering, accept the fact that we're suffering, and then figure out how to not suffer. Now, here's the weird thing about peace peace is accepting the unacceptable. So that means that we have to, I don't accept the fact that you think I'm a jerk. I think it's terrible you think I'm a jerk. But the fact that I don't accept the fact that you think I'm a jerk is going to create a lot of chaos. The fact that I accept that you think I'm a jerk, now we have the grounds of a discussion. And that is the most important thing about conflict resolution is seeing the fact that we may be seen in a way that we don't like. Conflict can make most people feel uneasy, whether a full blown argument or a civil confrontation. But some people avoid conflict at all costs, even when the conflict is necessary. And that's because they have an inner child running their life. They got married, they did all this wonderful stuff where everybody watched them take vows and say what their stupid vows are. Now they like to make them up instead of have biblical ones. That's why also job security for me. But the fact is that if you're going to take a responsibility in life and going to join and make a life with someone else, you have to understand that comes with conflict because that person comes from an entirely different background, an entirely different life. And yes, you went through the honeymoon phase and you thought each other walked on water, but you don't. You both stink. You have bad breath. You look ugly in the mornings. You do stupid things. You say stupid things. That's why we have to be able to do conflict because we're human. And our human is not perfect. Our human is very difficult. Our human is very complicated and very egotistical. So if you're going to join your life to another human, you're joining up with something that's highly complicated, highly conflict driven, and if you avoid conflict, they're going to mow you down like a Mack truck and you're going to be nothing but a whimper or the coyote in the roadrunner. Conflict avoidance can damage your relationships and harm you because all you're doing is avoiding a conflict, which creates more conflict. Some people have the same arguments for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, even 60, 70 years if they're married because they avoid conflict. And that is torture to never resolve anything. And what it does is it means us as a couple are pretty worthless because we can't resolve anything. And if you can't resolve anything, you're not adults. If you can't save money, you're not adults. If you can't take care of yourself, you're not adults. You're little kids in an adult body trying to act like adults. Grow up, become the age you are. step into your developmental phase and understand that that comes with accountability, that comes with responsibility, and it comes with conflict, and it comes with the idea that the people in your life have different perspectives than your own, and they judge you harshly, horribly, and it's okay. They're entitled. And if you accept that, you're going to have a much more peaceful life. But these conflict avoidance people just walk around with resentment and they never resolve it because they're passive aggressive and they're wimpy. And when they die, nobody's going to remember them because they were never able to do conflict. They just slip through life being a wimp, and then they die a wimp, and nobody could give a rat's ass about their life and all the things they did unless they left a bunch of money behind. Conflict can make most people feel uneasy, whether a full blown argument or a civil confrontation. However, some people avoid conflict at all costs, and so they will only do it when they feel it's necessary. And that's a terrible thing. Because once again, people that are good at conflict do it as adults. They do it as a transaction. They do it as a negotiation. They do it as a sense of respect for each other. Okay, so what you need is this, and what I need is this. How do we form a way that we can conclude this? Now, if we're going to call each other names and make each other into bad people, we're probably not going to negotiate well. But if we respect the fact that we're two human beings with two different perspectives coming from two different goals, we can find a way through that. That's called diplomacy. And human beings can do that if they put their egos aside. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about tools to resolve conflict. So let's come back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about conflict avoidance, to be wimpy. There's one main reason people are conflict avoidant. It's because they're expecting that sharing their thoughts or feeling is going to result in a fight or being abandoned. And they're expecting some kind of negative result. And a lot of this research in this world shows that the conflict avoiders often come from homes where conflict was considered a bad thing. Some people are so proud, my parents never fought. My family was always calm. That's great. But did they resolve, or did they just put up with crap and put up with mediocre? Because mediocre is pretty worthless. It's great to be mediocre. You got through life. Okay, you did it. You got through life. Great. Now, if it's about accomplishing life or actually make an impression in life or actually propel another generation forward into a better life where they had a voice and they had intelligence and they were able to propagate new ideas and they were able to move our culture forward, that would be a great thing. But a lot of people's goals is mediocre. And if it's mediocre, then just be mediocre because you're the vast majority of our population. And if you want to be mediocre and breed mediocre kids, have no conflict, have no voice, do a good job of that. Sit around and don't do crap. Do everything that pleases everybody and just live that way and die that way, and everybody will forget about you. If you want to have a life, if you want to have a real life, if you want to move forward, you better have a voice. And that's important. And you better do conflict safely. That's important also. So, to do conflict safely, you have to think different. First things first, conflict means you're intelligent, you have a voice. But if you're going to be intelligent and have a voice, you better assume that other people have a voice too, and you're going to be curious enough to care about another person's voice. Now, earlier I mentioned a thing called the Socratic method. That's where, in Europe, especially in England, where school is really, really good, is people would sit around, they'd read a book, they'd come to class, and they'd talk about what they learned, and everybody had a different opinion. Everybody had a different perspective. Everybody had different ideas of what they learned. And they would share that with each other. And by doing that, they would learn from each other. And by learning from each other, they would gain a whole lot and they would respect each other because they learned from each other. That's the Socratic method. And that is the way we're supposed to operate as human beings. Unfortunately, egotistical people like to treat the whole world like we're all stupid. And they like to tell you that they only understand what the truth is, and I don't care what other people think. And that's what egotistical people do. They shove their crap down everybody else's throat without thinking or without considering other people's ideas. You got to change your beliefs if you avoid conflict. You've got to have an opinion or you've got to be willing to learn and you've got to seek others' points of view. You got to create a positive association around sharing your thoughts and feelings with others by actually respecting the fact that they have other thoughts and feelings. And they use this doing a technique called cognitive reframing. And that is validating other people's perspective and also helping them understand what your perspective is so you both communicate with each other and respect each other. On a basic level, cognitive reframing helps you look at a situation, a person, a thought, a feeling from a different perspective. And it's a strategy that helps you open your mind to a new point of view, a new angle on what's happening to you. And this is what the problem has always been with these wokies. They cannot understand anybody else's perspective, but they think their shit doesn't stink. And so they've shoved that crap down our throat. And now they got Hollywood doing it in all of our movies, TV shows, and all that crap. They got to tell us how to live. We have to think differently. We as human beings have to respect other people's perspectives. That's called maturity. You also have to set yourself up for success. It's very important to work before conversations or to let a conversation go until you've learned more and re-engage a conversation after you've done some research and actually learned something. You want to get your physical self in check. And that means avoiding conflict for a while. You have to have a neutral association with fear and with sharing your feelings. And fear and sharing your feelings are very important to overcome. You want to be able to overcome fear because you want to have transactional dialogues that are safe with other human beings, including your marital partner, including your children. Transactional, especially when it comes to conflict and when it comes to discipline. Very transactional, very safe. It's also very much very important to set yourself up for success by talking about what your goal is. And hopefully your goal is listening. Hopefully your goal is success. Hopefully your goal is respect. And if you could think rationally, you can have beliefs and good feelings and good thoughts about a conversation. You can actually enjoy a conflict with another person. And it doesn't have to be scary at all because you're willing to listen to them and they're willing to listen to you. But if they're not willing to listen to you, you have to let them know, how can we do conflict if you're not even willing to listen? Oh, I am willing to listen, but you don't agree with me and you don't remember this and you don't think about that. Well, you know what? Let's take a time out. And when you're ready to listen in about 30 minutes, let's come back and see if you can do it because you know what? This ain't working. I have no voice here. All I have to do is listen to your bullshit, and it's not always that great. So, why don't we think about it and understand that we have two different perspectives? And in a half hour, maybe we can sit down and be like human beings and civil and care about each other. Wouldn't that be nice? The thing is that we want to improve ourselves. But the best way and the most efficient way to improve ourselves is to learn from each other. There is huge amounts of things we can learn from each other, including your children can teach you a whole lot, like being humble. Being a conflict avoider is a very childish activity. It's a very much what you're going to do to lie to your parents so that you could get away with stupid crap that you do. And guess what? Conflict avoiders do a lot of stupid things. And when they do a lot of stupid things, they lose their integrity when people figure it out. And if you're going to be a conflict avoider, you're also a liar because you only tell people what you believe they're willing to hear. And if you're going to be a liar and have no integrity, you're probably going to end up in a nursing home by yourself with nobody showing up because you have no value. Liars have no value. So if you're going to go through life being a conflict avoider, your value to other people is terrible. Unless they want to have a nice peaceful cup of coffee and talk about just general conversation. Nobody wants to spend their time doing that crap. They want to have real conversation. Unfortunately, we got to talk about the weather. And that's because conflict avoiders only have certain things they can talk about. Now, if you want to have a real relationship with someone, you want to be willing to talk about feelings and meaning and what's been important in your life and what's important in my life. The other thing is understanding that you do not have any moral high ground. You're just as heinous as everybody else. And if you're going to hold yourself as better than other people, nobody wants to talk to you or hear your crap anyway. So, egotistical people are very hard to deal with because they are closed off to the world and they're very surfacey people. And so, if you're going to be married to somebody like that, you're going to have to command the fact that if we're going to care about each other, if we're going to have deeper conversation, if we're going to be connected, and if you want me to open my legs and do sexual things with you, or me do sexual things with you, and because you as a female want that, or you as a male and another male, or you as a female, God only knows 72 genders nowadays, whatever the hell. If we're going to have sex with each other, we better know each other better. We better be kind to each other and we better do conflict and we better respect each other. A lot of people resent, and the bedroom is the first battleground for that to happen, and communication is also the next battleground where that happens. So people have very surfacey relationships. As a matter of fact, you can always tell how deep a relationship is by their level of commitment to conflict. People who are conflict avoidant have a very surfacey relationship with each other, avoid conflict at all costs, and they're about the loneliest people on the planet because they're stuck with this turd who they can't have even a deep conversation with. And so, if you're going to be married to a turd and not have deep conversation and perpetually lonely, there's a good chance that someday somebody's going to come along and give you some attention, and you're going to want to have an affair because somebody on this planet actually sees you. So, if you're going to have a marriage, you better work on it and you better put forward conflict. And you better put it forward in a real way where you respect each other's feelings. Because if you're going to do conflict, you have to respect each other's feelings because we are human. We have logic and we have feelings. Feelings are meaning. So if my mom means something to me and my mom means something else to you, we're going to have a difference of opinion. And that's how life is because we as humans have different meanings on different topics, on different things, on different conflicts, especially conflicts. And we have to resolve meanings before we resolve conflicts. We also have to show empathy. And there's a lot of people out there that are autistic or kind of autistic, or I would say analytical, ruminative, meaning they keep everything in their own heads. And then half the other population are these auditory turds that have to speak 8,000 words in a day and ask you the same question 5,000 times because they have to hear what's in their head just to understand what's in their brain. And it's really hard on a ruminative to have to hear that crap because it's like, why would you ask me a question when you haven't even thought about it yourself? And that's because they're auditory processors. So these kind of people get married. You got one that has to do it all in their head, and the other one that doesn't verbally. And if you're going to be married to somebody like that, you better tolerate the fact that we both think differently. The ruminatives don't believe in sharing a thought until after they've thought it all the way through. They think that's respectful. Well, no, it's not. It's crappy. If you got a thought, you better share it, especially with your auditory partner, because they need to hear it so they can process it the same amount of time that you do. Empathy is a very important thing. Here is empathy. One person jumps off the cliff. The other person walks to the edge of the cliff and they either jump off with them, that's called sympathy, or they stand at the top and they say, look, you jumped off the cliff. I don't know why you did this, but I'm going to throw you a rope or I'm going to seek help. Okay. That's empathy. Once again, sympathy is joining the problem. What you owe each other in conflict is empathy. I can understand how you think that way. I can understand you are very upset. I get it. I hear you. I understand your perspective. I'm willing to understand all that. I just don't agree with it, but I understand it. And by the fact that I understand it, and by the fact that you've taken the time to do that, you can afford to disagree because you've processed their thoughts. If you're the one who's struggling with conflict avoidance, have some compassion, some patience, and some empathy for yourself. It's learned behavior and reminding yourself that you are taking new actions, which will become new habits over time. You need to learn how to become a good listener, and you need to learn how to validate. And you also need to learn to not avoid conflict by having an opinion. These are all very important things in our life. None of this will hold if you're not mindful before, during, and after a conversation. So, people that have conversations to be right, which are narcissists, are horrible people. They need to grow up. You're not freaking right. You're not God. Shut the hell up and listen. That's what we all have to do. We all have to be willing to shut the hell up and listen, even if you think someone's batshit crazy. Listen, because that shows that you are a respectful person, and that shows that you're a person of wisdom because you're willing to learn and you're willing to hear other perspectives. These jerks that have to be right, especially if you're married to them, are jerks, and let them know. When you're ready to actually listen, we may have a real relationship. That's our show. I want to thank everybody for listening. I love hearing from you. You can do that on our webpage at voiceamerica.com, the empowerment and the health and wellness channels, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now remember, conflict avoidant, avoid conflict at the cost of long-term suffering. Also, a wimp is defined as noticing everything and saying nothing. Also, we need to listen to understand and not listen to reply. Also, vulnerability is the only path to real connection, trust, and understanding. Thanks for listening, everybody.